Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, wait a minute. This is copyright infringement. I can't say this. Guys, this is Daniele Donzì, always as your host. This is SideTalk Slam, and this is the number 85 SideTalk Slam. And guys, we always said, wrestling is our passion. Okay, but behind that, there are incredible aspects that we can't oversee every single day. Today, we are speaking about business. And guys, business is booming. Today, I have a special guest. He is from WrestleNomics.com, probably the greatest person on earth on this on this aspect of the wrestling business. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Thurston. Brandon, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I feel like I'm on a world tour now. Are most of your listeners, they live in Italy?
They are Italian, so most of them, all of them, I believe. Yeah, there are also some ladies. Cool. So be polite. We also have ladies in our audience.
Certainly.
So I would like to start things off with maybe a personal question. When I saw WrestleNomics.com, it's an incredible blog for people who don't know it. It's an incredible blog that I came across in last week because I was searching some sources for my reportage, which is called Business is Booming. It is actually live on our website. I came across WrestleNomics.com, and guys, if you are keen in economics, if you're looking for financials, if you're looking for any number of figures that may be property, something of the WWE, please go ahead. That's the place to be. WrestleNomics.com, it's incredible. If you're interested in economics and wrestling at the same time, you can't miss this website. It's incredible. So, Brandon, my first question, how on earth did you come up with the idea of a blog that is specific on the business, economic side of the business, of the wrestling business? And probably I said it before starting this registration. When I saw this website, I thought either this guy has a serious problem or probably he is really, really, really interested in economics. So how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I actually am not the one who originally created WrestleNomics. WrestleNomics, I guess, is a brand or a word that a guy named Chris Harrington, he created. He started using the brand in about 2013. And he's done similar work for years before I started to do this. I only really started to write and follow closely the business side of wrestling to the extent that I do now, around 2015 or 2014, through the present. But Chris, who many know as Mookie, he had been following that for years before then, and he had done a lot of jobs, in his day job and his work life that had to do with sort of data analysis and things like that. So he was really in a good position to do that sort of analysis. I am now doing WrestleNomics alone. Chris and I had a podcast together, the WrestleNomics podcast, and then in the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019, he left WrestleNomics, and now he works for All Elite Wrestling. He works for AEW. So now WrestleNomics is just me, and I have started doing the blog and started to use WrestleNomics.com, and to put stats on there and to put my written articles on there. And I've been doing the podcast every week now, especially since the pandemic. I've really picked up on it, and I've been doing that every week since March. And the podcast is released every weekend, and you can find that on your podcast app. But I got interested in this subject because I guess I am a wrestler. I haven't wrestled during the pandemic yet, but I've been an independent wrestler since 2003, and I've been a wrestling fan, I guess, all my life. And you hear a lot of discussion, among fans and even among wrestlers about, just about the business or about the industry. And there's, everybody has an opinion, but the facts are kind of more slippery. Not everybody, I think, is quite as sure of the facts as they seem to be, or as they could be. And I see what I'm doing is trying to put some facts behind all the discussions and all the interesting debates that people have about the wrestling business. And I've always been interested in the way that new media and the way that technology changes our lives in general and changes business as well. And I think new media and new technology has
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is the point. This is the point that I've been carrying on in my reportage. That the media has changed the perspective of the business since the very beginning. We are talking about not only what was done from a young Vince McMahon, right, when the first contract for the television, but also for the pay-per-view, the paid television. And I took one of your figures from the website that really interested me so much. So let's enter in the business. Let's address the elephant in the room, which is the point of probably the war reportage. Business is booming. How do they make money? This has been quite something taken for granted for years, because it's like the starting point. Vince McMahon is a billionaire. All discussions, they start all like this. He is a billionaire. He can do whatever he wants. Guys, he was not always a billionaire. He had this sensation. We have this perception of him like being a billionaire. But can we safely say that only in the last years he has a turnover of $1 billion a year from the WWE? But at the very beginning was not so much like this. So what I carried out is where the Vince McMahon and the WWE made money for the first time, big money for the first time. And I found out a figure from your website, which is incredibly interesting. And this is the yearly revenue from the late 90s up to today. And there are 2 points which are which almost this thing speaks for itself. It's the period 1998-2002 and from the 2015 up to now. And if you look at what happened in these 2 things, right? What happens in 1998 and 2002? We had the Attitude Era and we had the Monday Night War. So, basically, can we say what is one of the bloodiest war, ever, was not exactly about business, was about a war who was making more revenues from the wrestling business.
The Monday Night War, it's especially for WWE, it's the most popular era in their history, because of the stars that were there at the time, and they made a lot of their revenue at that time. A large portion of their revenue, I would have to look to see what the percentage breakdown is as far as where was the revenue coming from. But a lot more of the percentage of their revenue at that time in the late 90s was coming from ticket sales, as compared to this year, where the business has really evolved. And I say that the business has been turned upside down, where now you've got in the year of 2020, they'll report their full year report including Q4 on February 4th, and we'll know the exact number. But the numbers that we do know through Q3,
we're on $1 billion. We're on $1 billion. Yeah, but
the numbers that we do have,
the ticket sales. There were the ticket sales in the Attitude Era, in the Monday Night War. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the period where the ratings on the TV were the highest ever. We're talking about 8.5 for Monday Night Raw, which is unprecedented. Today we are talking 1/4 of those ratings.
Right. The TV ratings in the late 90s and early 2000s are much higher than they are today. And it's now, granted, it's a different media environment now, where there's a lot more competition for people's entertainment time, and there are the fewer people in the U.S. have cable TV. They just don't feel the need to have a cable subscription anymore because there's so much streaming video there's so much Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu and all those kinds of services that are basically competing with cable. And so there's, a growing number of people who just don't have cable, so therefore they can't watch the USA Network and watch Raw on the USA Network every Monday. But what's changed is that today, and what happened between the year 2000 and today is that as there's been an increase in competition for people's time, viewership for TV programs in general has declined, and that's made the remaining most viewed programs, which include programs like Raw and SmackDown, those programs have become exceedingly valuable to the networks that they're on, because those are the really key programs that are keeping people from canceling their cable subscriptions, especially the kind of content that people have to watch live, which is like wrestling. People want to watch it live, and that's resulted in a situation where the TV rights fees for Raw and SmackDown have grown tremendously over that time, and now WWE gets about $500,000 a year. In 2020, that's about what they made for Raw and SmackDown. Average annual value of their contracts combined throughout from late 2019 through late 2024 is going to be $470 million a year.
Wow!
So they're going to have their highest revenue generating year in 2020, and they have already broken their net income or their profit record for just through 3 quarters. As long as they don't have a hugely negative Q4 report that they put out on February 4th, they're already at their most profitable year ever for 2020, even though they're not nearly as popular as they were in previous eras.
Absolutely, and this is the pandemic year, right? It's incredible to think about it from a business point of view. A business that 20 years before, as you said, was on ticket sales. Was based on ticket sales. Yes, TVs, absolutely. Half of the revenues probably, but we are talking of 120, 140 million dollars. Okay, but now today we are talking about 1 billion, and that's the proportion. But from that, what happened when the Attitude Era ends? That's interesting. I think something that I really didn't want to address in my reportage, because I wanted to just let people understand how the media were affecting the business from the McMahon perspective. Okay, but it's what is in between the 2002 and 2015. It's interesting, okay, because 2015 is when the WWE Network came up, and from that point on we have a growth every year, and I don't know, we are not seeing the end of this. But in between, there's like nothing happens. It's like if at the Attitude Era, Monday Night War, we have this increase, and then everything stops, but the profits, the revenues, they remain the same. And in this period, we have John Cena. So can we safely say that John Cena was the reason for not having a loss of revenues in WWE business?
You're talking about the period between 2002 and 2015, I guess.
Yes.
I don't think John Cena alone gets all the credit for that, but wrestling has been and still is. It depends on the star power of the top wrestlers, of the top stars in the company, and all of the TV deals that they have, all the W Network subscribers that they have, at one time, the pay-per-view buys that they sold, the tickets that they sold, those are built on the attraction of seeing the in-ring content, as they say today, and that's built on the attractiveness of the card or the attractiveness of the TV shows, and those are built on the quality of the stars. And John Cena definitely was probably for that period that you're referring to, 2000. He really comes up about 2004, right? And
up 2003, I believe. That's the period, 2003, I believe, 2004. But that's, you see, in your graphic, you see a slight decrease from 2001, 2002, 2003. Then it stops the decrease, and then it starts increasing a little bit from $511 million a year to $576 million a year. And then the network came in. That's interesting, okay, because we have the biggest increase in the last 5 years. We are going from $576 million a year to $1 billion estimated for this year and most likely also for next year. Mm-hmm. Can we say WWE is no more looking only at the American people as the reference customer for their product? Since the network is global, right? Network now is going every place. Yes, they started. They needed a little bit of traction, okay, but then they started, and now we have the network everywhere in the world. Right. So actually, WWE is no more speaking to the American country, not only to the American country, and that means maybe a little bit less of attention on the nation, and a little bit more of attention to the rest of the world, and that means doubling basically their income in 5 years.
I think so. WWE has throughout all of its history that I know of, for at least the last couple of decades, has always tried to distribute its TV throughout the world. In recent years, its TV deal with India has surpassed the United Kingdom in terms of average annual value. But WWE, as time goes on, I think has been and will continue to be. It will continue to try to grow its revenue in international markets. I think, and this is according to WWE executives, I think the last time I probably heard George Barrios, who's the former co-president of WWE, talk about this, and it may have been referenced after that too, more recently, that WWE is getting about 70% of its revenue from the U.S., from its domestic market, and about 30% of it from international markets. So they believe that there's, and the other point that they always bring up in that context is that if you look at the digital activity, the online activity, whether it's through YouTube or social media, about 70% of that activity is from international markets, and only 30% of it is from U.S. markets. So it's sort of inverted in terms of where the digital activity is and where the revenue is coming from. And they see a big opportunity there to get that margin closer together, so where they can get maybe something like half of the revenue from international markets and half of their revenue from U.S. markets. So I think part of what we're seeing in regard to that is WWE wants to put an NXT brand and a training center, performance center on probably every continent in the world. And they've already done that in the U.S., but they've done that in the U.K.
And they will do it in India, in Japan, in China.
It looks like India is the next step. They're doing the big, Superstar Spectacular coming up in a few weeks. And I don't know this, but I think a performance center or a long-term NXT brand will probably be next there. I think they want to do something similar in South America. I don't know, maybe Brazil. Before the pandemic, there was rumors that maybe they would do an NXT brand in Japan. There were rumors that they were dealing with, they were negotiating with various Japanese companies about possibly buying a company. But I think they want to make the network more localized, both in terms of the content and in terms of the language. They want to have a greater diversity of languages available. Obviously, I understand on the pay-per-views there's a vast selection of languages that you can watch them in live, but they want to do more localized programs, more localized languages with localized commentary and things like that.
And that's the point. If you take this as a long-term view of the WWE business, you see in the United States maybe alone will not be the greatest part of their revenues. And that brings me to, the point that you already mentioned. NXT will be spreading all over the place. Okay. Quite interestingly enough, maybe the world greatest event may not be WrestleMania, but be Worlds Collide. It will be like the Olympics with athletes from all over the world. But one of the questions that many people asked me, was why WWE is going to Saudi Arabia. And you said it. they give the WWE an incredible amount of money. So can we expect this? Because you said 5 Saudi Arabia events, 2019.
Yeah.
I have this graphic in front of me. I still can't believe it. We have $250 million, okay, against $210 million. So all the WrestleMania ever can't compare to the five events in Saudi Arabia in 2 years. So,
and that's adjusted for inflation too. That's 1985 through the present, but adjusted to like $2020. So still, but all I'm saying there is that I didn't not adjust it for inflation, so it would be even lower if I hadn't adjusted it for inflation. So that's in terms of real dollars. Those 5 events are that much more valuable than all the WrestleMania gates. Just the ticket sales from the WrestleMania, not the pay-per-view value, obviously.
So guys, now you understand why I think this guy is sick. He took out on the inflation of these things to create the real value. Guys, incredible. And my question still stands. If this is the premises, and then we could count also on Super Showdown in Australia, and maybe in the future something in India, maybe something in China, more of this. Well, where will be all the traditional pay-per-views? Let me explain this right. We have a pay-per-view per year. Per month, sorry. We have the Elimination Chamber coming up. We have the Royal Rumble. We have the WrestleMania, but also we have SummerSlam. We have the Money in the Bank. Shall we expect that some of this pay-per-view will be delocalized? And maybe we have the Money in the Bank in Japan. We have the SummerSlam in China. We have, I don't know, the Survivor Series maybe in Saudi Arabia. I don't know. Is this the future that awaits us?
Not the foreseeable future. I think a big value to WWE in doing the pay-per-views is that they are alive, and the majority of the WWE Network subscribers still are in the US. And I think if you do the pay-per-views in other markets, it makes it more difficult for the majority of the subscribers to then watch live and to get the value out of it, I guess. So the reason though why they're doing the Saudi event, they're getting $50 million, $50 million every time they go there, and that's guaranteed money. That's not the result of selling tickets.
Yeah, for the next 8 years, by the way.
It's a 10-year deal, and we're 2 years into it. So the reason why the Saudi government has apparently made that deal with WWE is because it's part of, I'm sure those $50 million per event are part of a great deal of money that's been allocated towards Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 plan, which is basically an economic and public relations program that the Saudi government is conducting to improve the image of Saudi Arabia worldwide. And I think the value to the Saudi government in doing a WWE event and having it broadcast on the WWE Network is that it shows, it tries to sort of soften the image of Saudi Arabia around the country, and even in the midst of the deal, on the second one, and the lead up to the second one, the journalist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, and the Saudi government appears to be involved in that, and there's a lot of I think Saudi Arabia
they're not so reliable for the future, so you can rely on this for having a Royal Rumble there. That's the point, I believe.
Well, I think they'll. I don't see them stopping the deal. It's so valuable. Like that, if they do two events a year, which is what they've done in non-pandemic times, they've done 2 events a year, and that's what the deal. That's what they've put out a press release saying it's a 2 event per year deal. So that's $100 million per year. That's about, if they make $1 billion in revenue, which is roughly what they'll report in 2020, they're going to that's 10% of their revenue in a year. So that's a huge piece of their business. And
absolutely. Without airing anything on national soil. So before starting the year, even if you stop the business and you just do these 2 events in Saudi Arabia, you got $100 million.
Right.
Right. That's the point. That's incredible, but that's granted turnover for those who are keen in economics, and that's how the business goes. But yes, you had a good point. Most of the revenue still comes from the North America, and you haven't. I'm taking this from the early balance from the WWE.com website, and yes, they have for 2019 they declared almost $1 billion in revenues, and 656 million are coming from the North American. I can say from the Middle East, Europe, Africa, 223 million, and from Asia Pacific, 67 million, and Latin America, 12 million. Sure, there is room for improvement. There is room for having Asia Pacific is incredibly low compared to the potential they have. You mentioned India, I mentioned China, so maybe Japan. There is room for improvement, but still they have to be reliable. Actually, in these days, you have a new U.S. president. We hopefully will have better deals with the Chinese president, but they cannot be, if they can be reliable and there are some diplomatic incidents, they will not have any event, and that's a problem. That's something not good for business.
Yeah, with to talk about Asia specifically. So in India, WWE is pretty popular. That's, again, like I mentioned earlier, that's their number 2 TV market. They've done a small handful of events in India. They did one in around 2002 that I think is famous for. Everybody left there and got sick for whatever reason. But they did a couple events after Jinder Mahal became the WWE champion. They planned 2 events. They ended up canceling one, which gives me the impression that maybe ticket sales didn't go as well as they had hoped. But so China is another region that executives have talked about as being a big opportunity area for them. I think it's looked at as a country that has a lot of opportunity for a lot of businesses. But WWE doesn't appear to be very popular yet in China. I think everybody looks at China and says they've got, over 1 billion people in their country. So how do we get in there and do business with a huge population? But for whatever reason, at this point, WWE isn't very popular in China. They do have some TV deals there, but it's definitely an area that they would like to grow. And you see when they bring out recruits to the performance center, they've signed up a few Chinese wrestlers over the years, but they haven't been able to develop them. And the WWE Performance Center is a whole another subject to look into and analyze, just the how the talent has turned out, and whether the WWE Performance Center is worth everything that they're putting into it financially. But yeah,
shall we count Australia on it? Because Australia, I think they are very popular there.
Yeah, they have a deal with, I think it's Foxtel in Australia. I think I would have to look at the population numbers, but I think what is the population of Australia? It's I know it might be along the lines of, like, there's countries like Canada that has about 1/10 of the population of the U.S. So there's 25 million people in Australia, and I think I would guess that as far as an emerging market for WWE, that Australia is fairly saturated, but they could continue to do house show tours there. But yeah, I think if you compare the population of Australia to the U.S., that's less than 1/10 of the population.
Sure.
So
just a lot of talents come from Australia. So thinking like a lot of talents come from the UK. So in the UK, definitely, they did the NXT UK in the performance center there. Maybe they're doing, or down the line, they will be doing the performance center in Australia. And maybe have an increase there, or maybe be a polarizing center for the Southeast of Asia. I don't know.
Could be.
So, you mentioned one very, very, very good thing, because this is what we call the epitome of what's wrong with WWE. You said Jinder Mahal champion.
Yes.
And there's two things. Every time I have this podcast, every time I say, guys, we should not be thinking about how good Jinder Mahal is in the ring, because that's the problem. Probably with, I think most of the viewers around the globe, they see, John Cena, the 5 moves of doom, and then they get bored. And so why is champion? they see Jinder Mahal. They've seen, well, actually, luckily for a short period of time, Win the Ring was not as good as AJ Styles. Okay, but he's still champion. Why do they do that? And every time I get here, I say, guys, you have to look at the business. WWE is preparing a tour in India. What better way of going there with a champion coming from India? That would be incredible. There would be a lot of people cheering. I said, guys, that's marketing. Nothing less, nothing more. But everyone was indignated. No, this can't be possible. He can't wrestle. He is ugly. He said a lot of things. We don't want to see another great Khali. And then now we are speaking about having an NXT performance center in India. Shall all we be scared then that we will have another Jinder Mahal down the line?
I don't know. I mean, I think the idea behind putting the title on Jinder Mahal is that, they saw, I think it was WWE trying to apply their wider business strategy onto the creative element of WWE. They wanted to create a new huge Indian star in Jinder Mahal, and that didn't really work out. I think the way to appeal to international markets is maybe more so to just, try to create stars that will have worldwide appeal and not necessarily localized appeal. But I can't really predict what Vince McMahon will do now or in the future. But I would think though that maybe they've learned, and that was an experiment that didn't seem to work out all that well, and they probably won't do something on that wide of a scale again. And I think they would probably stick more to doing these sort of localized, regionalized brands, like NXT, maybe an NXT focused in India, an NXT focused in the UK. But yeah, the reason why anybody is a champion, or should be a champion, I guess, is about, how over are they, how big of a star are they perceived as, and that's how you book your promotion around. That's how you should book your promotion, around building big matches between big stars who are over with a huge number of people.
Well, we will see what will be the future of WWE in this perspective. We all hope to always see a good product, and if that's profitable for WWE, it's all good and done. So let's go, because since the moment I got with the idea of this reportage, the business is booming, I got some questions, from the guys. And so now I'm going to make you some questions, if you don't mind. So if you can answer the question.
That'd be great.
The very first question is an incredible. You hear me?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I think I lost you for a second.
Okay, don't worry. Here we are. The first question comes from a guy, which actually has his own YouTube channel. It's Eagle and Donald. Yes, let's talk. He's Eagle. Actually, his name is in the Italian translation of Eagle, but we call it Eagle anyway. But yes, he was asking the role of the social media in the WWE revenues. Is that WWE making money out of the activities running around the social medias?
Not directly. The biggest revenue generator related to anything that's digital or social media is YouTube. And I think YouTube is worth, on an annual basis, about $20 to $30 million for them. Again, put that in the context of a company that's generating about $1 billion in revenue annually. The argument for putting a lot of energy and time and labor into social media is that this is how, especially your younger audience, is consuming their media these days. And if you want to attract fans and create fans, you have to have a large presence on social media. And W does. W is very popular on social media and on YouTube, but they don't generate a ton of revenue there, at least not yet. I don't know if they ever will. Former President George Barrios, his argument was that, if you look at the history of media in general, or in professional wrestling, you'd see that, back in the day, in the 80s or 90s, cable TV was not a very big revenue generator, which is sort of what we were talking about earlier. The wrestling business was a ticket-based business years ago, and pay-per-view as well. And it wasn't so much about selling media rights or selling TV rights. And now that's the biggest piece of revenue. So I guess the idea would be, invest in this area early, and it may not generate that much revenue now, but maybe it'll generate a lot of revenue in the future. And a lot of people theorize and debate about whether or not that's a good philosophy. But that is at least their former president's view. I don't know what their current management thinks about that, or if Vince has rethought that strategy since. But I think my opinion, it's important to have a strong presence on social media. I think it's wise to balance the time, revenue, and resources that you're putting into social media versus where else you should be focusing on your business in terms of television and other areas that you can monetize at a far higher rate. But especially if you want to have a younger audience, if you want to have an audience in the future, you need to be doing something on social media to engage with those people. And obviously people of all ages are using social media, but if you look at the TV demographics for WWE, the majority of their audience, in the US at least, the majority of the audience who's watching the TV show live on cable or on broadcast are over the age of 50. And I think that's a disproportionate measurement in terms of the average or median age of the average wrestling fan. I think it's, about 40 or so. But, that's, you do need to have a strong social media presence to have a strong future. And I think obviously WWE does have a huge social media presence.
So it's like saying, it's more like part of the job. Okay, you are a WWE superstar and you're not paid for that, but you better do it.
As far as why the wrestlers do so much stuff on social media, I think it's you could think of it that way. It's part of the job. It's part of getting.
No, probably I got the answer wrong. It was not just for the athletes. Okay, I'm thinking about also the producer and everything that comes around the social medias. It's like a line of thinking. Okay, if you think it globally, we have to be on social medias for wrestlers doing things for the storylines, maybe some exchange of tweets from that then they involves then it goes into some field, then battles on the ring. That's okay. Maybe it could be some other activities. There may be the announcement of a tournament, then that's comes from the social media and not on a live event. So it's like we don't need to, but we better do it because our audience will move there and we have to test things. It's like a sound check for the band.
Yeah, it's a marketing value. Over time, people in general, I think worldwide, are spending an increasing amount of their time looking at their phones and spending time on social media. So if you're not putting content on there or putting some sort of marketing message into those platforms, you're missing out on an opportunity to engage and create fans, I guess.
Okay. Let's move to another one of my colleagues, is Leonard, that said, well, I think the first one we already answered in the very beginning. We look at the data of 2020, difference with the previous years. Everything that we're missing, like live events, how the WWE got these missing revenues, and how they changed all these values for the shop, which is the local shop when you have the live event, or the WWE shop.com. But right. I think we already answered to this because we said, okay, that was the TV rights. TV rights will actually compensated most of the loss.
Yeah, and the thing is with live events, in terms of revenue, it means they missed out on, I don't know, 120 to 150 million dollars of revenue. But their live events division has actually, with the exception of the quarters that WrestleMania occurs in, the live events division has struggled to turn a profit probably because of the number of house shows that they run, and or at least how they do the accounting, live events for them are not very profitable. And I think there's big questions for after COVID about whether they're still going to do house shows, if they're going to do a far more limited house show tour. And I think they probably will, especially in terms of the North American house shows. I think there'll be a lot fewer North American house shows, and they may still continue to do some international tours that are more profitable for them. But yeah.
Can we say it will be realistic to have, when this pandemic will be over, the NXT brand to run the house show, the live events, with the on the road live events like the main roster, while the main roster running the globe for major events?
I think so NXT has already been doing house shows. They do a Florida loop where a lot of their newer talent sort of, I think those shows are basically run at a loss. There's a few hundred people there throughout Florida at those events, and they're not necessarily there to make a profit. They're there to provide some match experience to newer wrestlers or to wrestlers that they are developing. And then there's the bigger tour for NXT, which is comprised of wrestlers who appear more so on NXT TV, and they go around the country and around the world. But I think I don't think W will do a year-round international tour. They usually tour internationally when in the spring and in November or so. And I would think those would continue to be the times of the year where they would continue to do an international tour. Because I think they're going to continue to do the majority of their TV events in the U.S. So they don't want to have their whole roster touring around the world all the time, and they want to continue to do their TV live to their U.S. audience, which is their biggest TV market. And to do that live, you want to be somewhere in the U.S., taping it live and airing it live. So I think that's what will happen. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. The future is in front of us, and it is a great mystery for everyone. We still don't know if we will have a live audience. They say yes for WrestleMania, 25,000 people. That would be great. That would be, like a sign of the war is over and we are going to get back to our normal lives. And we will see for the future. But for all the people who don't go to the live events, we said it earlier, we have the WWE Network. So another question that comes from my colleagues is actually, when they launched the WWE Network, they had a great expectations, probably too much high for the tool. Okay, the WWE Network was not ready at the moment to make the revenues they were expecting. So I'm sure you have more details and more insights on the revenues coming from the network. So we have actually two questions. First, where is the revenues from the network? Is it only subscriptions, or this brought some third line, like, okay, I saw it on the network and then I go and get and buy something? Or and then do they need to increase the revenues coming from the network? From my perception, and taking the figure that you posted on WrestleNomics.com, it seems like really business is booming in the last 5 years, which is actually 5 years ago when the WWE Network was launched. So maybe it's not like they were dreaming of, but still they are making more money than they thought.
So on the first question, if WWE Network revenue comes mainly from subscriptions or elsewhere, it comes mainly from subscriptions. Okay. I'm looking at a column of the 2019 revenues, and the network generated $185 million in revenue, and that's all just subscriptions. I think there is some ad revenue because they're putting ads out there on the network, especially now they're doing the pre-roll ads I've seen. But there's also sort of in-programming sponsorships, and you could credit that to the network, I guess. Snickers, for example, has been the sponsor for WrestleMania for a number of years in a row. So you can look at that as being revenue that the network provides, because WrestleMania is an event that's primarily broadcast on the W Network. And the second question, what was the second question again?
If you think that if the network, if WWE needs to increase revenues from the network,
do they need to? They definitely want to.
Let me just say this, then you can go on. Mm-hmm. Actually, this is the last question you have to do for a company. Any company is born to make money. So the question is, if the company needs to make more money, yes, but they do billions. They still need to make more money. That's the basis of the business. So actually, yes. But I think the wider question was, is the network profitable enough?
It is profitable, I think. They don't report, they used to report a segment OIBDA, which is, OIBDA stands for operating income before depreciation and amortization. They used to report an OIBDA margin for the network, and it was profitable. That was in 2017, the last time they reported that. And the revenue is only slightly down from 2017 at this point. So I think the network is still profitable. It's not as profitable as they had hoped, merely because they had hoped for 3 to 4 million subscribers, and they're at about half of that. They've got about 1.6 million subscribers on average paying. So their strategy now is, especially since George Barris and Michelle Wilson, the former co-presidents, were fired about a year ago, their strategy now is to sell the network content, maybe including the pay-per-views, probably including the pay-per-views, in fact, to a major streaming player or other media company to distribute or monetize however they see fit. I think the idea is to do something similar to what the UFC did with ESPN Plus. So ESPN Plus sold its pay-per-view rights instead of distributing those pay-per-views themselves through various pay-per-view providers. They sold their pay-per-view rights to ESPN, and ESPN Plus is now the exclusive broadcast. I don't know if that's a worldwide thing or not. Maybe you know. But the UFC
I can tell you, in Germany, there's an agreement with DAZN.
Okay.
And maybe in Italy we have, in Europe we have something that actually could be interesting for the WWE, because for the next 3 years, the Soccer Champions League. Okay, I don't know if you follow the Champions League, but I think it's not so popular in the US as it is in Europe. It's like it's like the NFL. You have the Super Bowl, and we have the final of the Champions League. Actually, it's the biggest event in Europe for the year, and for the next 3 years, the rights for the transmission of it will go on Amazon Prime.
Oh wow!
So I think now the question is legit, because you mentioned that. So shall we expect to have the rights of the WWE on ESPN Plus? I think absolutely yes, and probably it could be also on Amazon.
Yeah, I think Peacock, which is right now only in the US and UK, I think, but NBC Universal, which is their partner in the US for TV, that's the owner of USA Network. But I think Peacock is a player. ESPN Plus, I think those are the two likeliest destinations for pay-per-views in the future for WWE. But Amazon Prime is another possibility. I think it could happen as early as this year before WrestleMania. I would be slightly surprised though, but I think within 2 to 3 years, somewhere or another, they will sell the rights to their pay-per-views and maybe their other content on the W Network to a major media company that has a major streaming service. And the pay-per-views may or may not be on the streaming service, but they'll be, distributed somehow or another, maybe even through linear TV. But I think there may be different deals, across the world. So it may be the case that if I want to watch a W pay-per-view in the US, I'll have to be a subscriber to ESPN Plus, for example, but it may still be distributed in Italy through the W Network for a time.
So, let's go to, some Wall Street question, because when you mention this, if you are analyzing the stocks of the WWE, you know that every announcement of this increases the value of the WWE actions. So the WWE stocks increase depending on many factors. But every single time we have this announcement, of the agreement with MSNBC or with the DAZN, with Amazon, the WWE stocks increase. So if you are an investor and you have a ton of money, would you suggest to take on WWE stocks in the next month, expecting this new selling of the rights for the streaming on other platforms?
I don't have. Well, let's see. I think so. I'm looking at the stock price right now. Stock price right now, and the market is about to close in the New York Stock Exchange in a few minutes here. It's at about $52.50. And it's on a little bit of a growth kick here since October. I think if WWE announced a pay-per-view TV deal, and then I don't think they would announce one and make one unless it was favorable to them. So I think that would increase the stock price, but I don't feel so confident that they're going to make such a deal this year. Maybe not until later in the year or next year. I don't know. I guess if I've never traded W stock, I've never owned it, and because I talk about this stuff so much,
I'm actually in shock. Between all people, you don't have WWE stocks? Really?
No. I think it would be a conflict of interest, or it would color the way people read my work. So that is my I am dedicated to never trading W stock.
Okay.
To be to
Fair
be more indifferent about it. But I think there was I'm not too confident that W stock is going to grow in value anytime that soon. That said, I'm pretty optimistic about their future TV rights value, when they're probably going to negotiate another US TV deal in 2022 and 2023. They'll probably finish a deal. And even though I think they're diminishing in popularity and they're ceding some of their cultural capital to AEW, I think they're still in a position to make a favorable deal in 2023. That'll probably coincide with stock growth throughout that time. I'm less optimistic over the really long-term story of this company, especially in terms of how, I think the future of this company is largely wrapped up, and I'm talking about like this super long-term 10-year future of the company, is largely dependent on the longevity of Vince McMahon and how long he remains healthy for and how long he remains as the head of creative. I think the longer that Vince remains the head of creative, which I believe he will remain the head of creative as long as he is physically able. I think the longer that he remains the head of creative, the less optimistic I am about WWE keeping all of its brand value and not ceding more of it to AEW. So
you're not so confident on Stephanie McMahon?
I think there's a good possibility that Stephanie McMahon will be the CEO someday. What I'm talking about is that I think the way that Vince books the product and books Raw and SmackDown is diminishing the value of the company versus what it would be otherwise. And let's say if Vince remains healthy for another 10, 15 years, at which point he would be like 90. But let's say that happens. I think WWE will get less and less popular, and I have a little bit more confidence that AEW will continue to strengthen its brand value, especially in the U.S. Around the world is another question. AEW has a lot of TV markets that it needs to get into, but I think that in the U.S. at least, the cool wrestling product is less and less WWE, and we're very early in this story, but it's more and more AEW, and especially with younger viewers, we see that. We're not seeing that this month in January, but we see that throughout 2020, especially during the pandemic, where all four of the major programs, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and AEW, all four of the major programs suffered at the beginning of the pandemic. NXT and AEW had a nice bounce back through the summer. Raw and SmackDown did not have the same bounce back, and I think, I to the extent that I watch Raw and SmackDown, I see it as a program that doesn't really engage people and make people care about it and develop emotional attachments with an audience. And I think NXT is somewhat more effective at that, and I think AEW is a little bit more effective than NXT at that. And I think if you extrapolate those trajectories out into a long enough timeline, that results in Raw and SmackDown getting less popular than the latter two. But I see NXT as being sort of pigeonholed into being this third brand that it is sort of by definition placed as. But with AEW, it may be different because they're obviously not part of the WWE system. So that's the super long-term view that I have.
Well, actually, you are confirming most of the fear of our audience who actually thinks that Vince McMahon is the problem, the real elephant in the room. But actually, without him, there will be no actual conception of WWE business or wrestling business at all. So
yeah, I think Vince has been a good corporate manager as far as how this business has been managed. If you just forget about the creative aspect of WWE for a moment, and like the way that Vince has put a lot of experienced people with experience in various aspects of media. Let's just take, for example, the hiring of Nick Khan. Nick Khan, who is the current and new president and chief revenue officer for WWE, he has a great deal of experience in negotiating media rights deals, which is central to the future value of WWE going forward. He's hired even George Barrios for. I think George Barrios overprojected the ways in which WWE could operate like a big tech company, but George had a lot of intelligent strategies, and Michelle Wilson as well, about how to monetize WWE's content and how to grow its media rights value over time. So I think Vince has been a decent, a good corporate manager. I don't know what the corporate culture is like in Stanford at Titan Tower, but the output that I see is, look, this company has become increasingly valuable, and they're about to have their most profitable year ever. So that stuff's okay, but the creative aspect is diminishing the potential of this company.
Well, maybe I think 10 years is too much long to see what happens in the future, and the proof is exactly what you just posted on WrestleNomics. The figure that we were looking before, as you can see, if you were looking at the business in the Attitude Era, you say, okay, in 10 years, the Attitude Era will be all over the world. And after 3 years, it stopped.
Yeah.
And then we had 10 years, let's say, of John Cena, which actually bring to no increase at all in revenues, but incredible popularity for the guy. Actually, we had last 5 years of complete increase. But so we can't predict on a 10-year basis. But the point is interesting. My point of view is they are testing Triple H for the creative on NXT on a long-term view. So actually, he's running it for years now, and he will run it. There, Vince has no value at all. Actually, he's nothing in NXT. Everything is run from Triple H. So it's very likely that in the future, creative direction will come from Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and others. So I'm confident that there will be some kind of change. And, Vince has been good at one thing and one thing only, adapting to the change. And when you need to pass the torch, I'm confident there will be some change. Maybe not just Stephanie and Triple H. Probably there will be someone else helping them out, but I think they are laying the foundation for this change, maybe just for the future. But you mentioned one thing, okay? You said it is a good corporate mate, but this corporation actually are doing something not very good. You remember a few weeks ago, maybe a month or a month and a half ago, we had the firing of Zelina Vega. The third party's problem. How do you think this is affecting the WWE revenues? Or is it increasing the WWE revenues? Or is it a problem? Shall someone address this problem in the future?
So you're talking about the firing of Thea Trinidad. Zelina Vega came after she had issues with WWE mandating that their talent stop using Twitch.
Twitch, exactly. The problem was exactly that. The so-called third parties problem. The Twitch, the fact that guys can't use exactly all the social media they want. How can this benefit WWE? Isn't it a problem?
So I think the idea is that WWE wants to make a deal with Twitch or Cameo or whatever other video platforms there are out there. And if the wrestlers are using these platforms and monetizing on them already, that undermines WWE's ability to make deals with those video platforms. So I think that's not a defense of what they're doing, but that's the reasoning behind
explanation. Okay, so actually, so you say if you let people doing what they do monetizing on Twitch, monetizing on Cameo or nothing, you are avoiding for these revenues to go through the WWE balance. And so the point is, WWE says until we don't have an agreement with Twitch, with Cameo, with others, don't do anything because all the monies you do have to go from me.
Right.
Is that correct?
And you know what will happen? Let's say WWE does make a deal with any or all of those companies, and then the wrestlers can use them again. The wrestlers will be getting probably a fraction of the revenue that they're getting before, that they were getting before. You could argue that another reason why WWE wanted to do this was because the wrestlers were figuring out another way to make money for themselves, and then therefore they were less dependent on WWE. And I think that's not a favorable position for an employer to be in, ethics notwithstanding. But I don't think any of that. I don't think the work. This flies in the face of wrestlers being classified as independent contractors in the U.S. when they seem to be being directed quite like employees. I'm not a legal expert, but it seems to me that there's a good case for these wrestlers are truly employees, legally speaking, and they're not independent contractors. But I don't see any of that changing anytime soon, because the change, whether that's to come from a lawsuit or whether that's to come from unionization, I don't think that's going to happen, because the WWE environment is highly competitive, and the people who are most in a position to cause that kind of a change or to begin unionization are the biggest stars. And the biggest stars are the ones who are already the most, the best paid, and they're the most secure. And so they have the least to gain from unionization. The wrestlers who have the most to gain from unionization have the least leverage. And compounding those dynamics, everybody is super competitive. Everybody wants to be the world champion. And if management hears that you're trying to start a union, I'm sure that will not be a very good thing for your career if unionization doesn't work out for you. So I think it's an unfortunate situation, and I think it's a legally problematic and ethically problematic situation. But I also don't see it changing anytime soon.
Okay, we're coming to the end of this episode of SideTalk Slam, and you're giving incredible insight of it. I got two straight questions to conclude this interview, and the first is, since now actually at this point, even the fourth part of my reportage is online, and that part is not on revenues, is on expenses. Because actually people think, WWE is making $1 billion, and tomorrow morning, Vince McMahon has $1 billion to spend for his vacations or whatever he wants. No, it's not actually like this. He has to pay, the athletes, he has to pay the production. And so I made a breakout from the WWE balance, for how do they spend their money. And actually, on $1 billion, we have 65% on operating expenses.
Yep.
That's interesting, which means that most of the revenues are invested in the production of the business itself. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what is missing here are the taxes. So there is a good part of taxes out of it. And let me make you these two questions. The first one, WWE never says how much they spend in detail. It's very rare to find out how much what is the engage for what is the amount of money they pay for John Cena, for Brock Lesnar, and we don't know how much they pay, for example, the Thunderdome. So, for example, how the Thunderdome, I think, was very expensive. How much did they spend for it?
That is a good question that I can kind of answer, but I don't know if I can answer it off the top of my head. A
rough estimation, let's say.
So I can start here. So that before the pandemic, when there were normal live arena Raw and SmackDown tapings, those events were very expensive, and I think Raw and SmackDown, a single Raw or SmackDown taping, I think costs WWE somewhere around $1 million for all the associated expense, everything from the production, which is I believe the biggest piece of expense, but also paying the talent. So about $1 million.
I made a small recap of paying the talent. I found out from other sources, and we reported on our website the 10 most paid athletes in 2019. And for men and for women, they never count for more than 10% in operating expenses. So if your number is true, $1 million for an episode of Raw or an episode of SmackDown, we are talking about $2 million a week. So roughly right. $100 million a year in producing Raw and SmackDown.
Right.
And $50 million, $60 million in paying the athletes. All the rest.
So
where does it go?
So well, first, I'm not. I guess those lists that show the wrestlers' pay, I think those are highly speculative, and I don't know how accurate they are, but that may be in the neighborhood of where. But the expenses for WWE, you're talking about the expenses overall in general for the whole company. They list marketing expense and general administrative expense, and they have to run their consumer products division, which consists of all their merchandise and whatever licensing expenses they have. But it's largely production expense and live event expense. And they have a headquarters building that isn't free. They have to pay the employees there, and they have executives who get paid millions of dollars every year. Yeah, so if you're asking about the tax that they paid, I think I have the tax here. They paid about 20%. Their effective tax rate was about 20 to 24% last year. But in 2019, their effective tax rate was 19%.
So on the $960 million they did in 2019, they paid 20% only on taxes?
They paid their trending schedules on corporate.www.com said that their 2019 effective tax rate was 19%, and their provision
19%.
Provision for income taxes was $17.6 million.
Okay, for every every person that is now listening to this podcast from Italy, where we pay from 40 to 60% on taxes, who has any activity listening that a multi-million, a corporation like the WWE is paying 19% in taxes, it's outrageous.
Okay. I bet you have healthcare though.
But we have healthcare. Okay. Yeah. Now, well, in a pandemic year like this, I should be happy that we have the healthcare granted. Well, I don't know. This is not the point. Still, the question remains: a rough estimation for the Thunderdome.
So what I was getting to there. So $1 million in normal situation, and then they went to the Performance Center and they saved tremendously because there was a far lower production expense. And the Thunderdome, I don't know. I would. It's cheaper than the normal live arena production, but a little bit more expensive than the PC.
If you compare it to the PC and to a normal set for production, I think it's highly expensive. You have 1,000 LED board. We have, I don't know, all the structures there. It has to be very expensive.
So I guess here I can give you a kind of an answer. So for Q1, the media operating expenses. So Q1 was mostly non-pandemic time, right? There's about 2 weeks of the pandemic in there, and they did $144 million in that quarter. For Q4, which I think bakes in that I did the math on the Thunderdome here, I'm estimating $119 million in media operating expense. So if you subtract 144 minus 119, you get $25 million in a quarter. So if you divide that by 3 months, that's $8.3 million per month. And if you divide that by 4, that's $2 million. Now, not all of that is core content, Raw SmackDown production, but a lot of it is. So I don't know. I would have to sit down with a spreadsheet to give you a real straight answer, but it's about a middle of the road between what it was at the PC versus what it was pre-pandemic at major sports arenas.
Okay, so I will write an email with the detail of this because I'm very curious about it.
Okay.
And the other question, if you know, so we got really to the end of this. Always in the fourth part of my reportage, I mentioned the copyright. Well, actually, at the very beginning, when I launched this interview, I launched it with a song which is actually under copyright, and a catchphrase which is under copyright. From the generation, from the X. And I did it on purpose because that's where I wanted to get. WWE is, supported from millions of copyrights they have, trademarks.
Yes.
But this is something that maybe a lot of people don't understand. One of the questions that came across from, especially from our chief of staff, actually, he always says, why Survivor Series now became a brand versus brand concept. Actually, I said, because brand is expensive to have a trademark for a brand. And you have to keep it globally because WWE is global. And you have to pay for years this. And if you expand this idea to the old brands and all the logo that WWE has, you think to the names they register. You think the name of the athletes, the name of the pay-per-views, the logos of the athletes, the logos of the pay-per-views, and everything. In total, these are all marketing expenses. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but if any company spends $1 in marketing, is expecting $3 or $4 back in revenues. So, what is the expense the WWE has in copyrights?
To keep their trademarks, I don't really know. I imagine, what's the expense? It's I don't know. There's probably fees associated with it, and then you have to pay it's probably a lawyer or something who takes care of it. I don't know. I don't think it's a huge expense relative to the scale of their company. But if you're thinking about it in terms of, is that the reason why they did this brand versus brand Survivor Series? I don't think so. I mean, having the trademark is important and essential to a trademark that you're using, frequently, that you want to get brand value out of. But I think their use of emphasizing the brand to the extent that they do is just a creative choice.
Oh, and guess why? Why are they emphasizing the brand? That's what I've been thinking from. Well, actually, I can give you some figure. I'm waiting an email also on this. Okay, so I can have a detailed answer also for whoever is listening. I'm an entrepreneur myself. Okay, I have a company. I sell software globally. I have my company doing this for 15 years now, and register a trademark is you can go for $3,000 only for one single logo. Okay,
mm-hmm.
For one company, for mm-hmm. one country, for one purpose. So you have to multiply. If you have not one logo, but you have, I think, tens of thousands of logos, and you have not only one purpose, but you have 4, 5 purposes on this, because you have the songs, you have the t-shirts, so you have the merchandise. So you have, the more purposes you have, the more you pay for the logo. So one single Raw logo and a Raw theme song and a Raw t-shirt and whatever it is, the WWE is paying tens of thousands of dollars every single year just for the Raw logo. Think about, you have all the pay-per-view, the show, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, NXT UK, SummerSlam, Bash at the Beach, whatever you mentioned. There are thousands. We are talking that every year has to be some tens of millions. That is the question that I wanted to get. The point is, they have to spend all of this money year by year. You know better than me. In the last 20 years, they have taken the rights for every WCW pay-per-view. Why? Because they don't want anyone else to use it. Right. But once they do it, that's why actually in AEW we have Jon Moxley and now Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose is property of WWE. Everything, the Asylum is property of WWE. So all the pictures, all the trademarks they do on action figures, they cost. Everything is a cost. And if they spend $1 in that, they expect $3 or $4 out of it. So they are spending 10, 20, $30 million a year only on copyrights. So that's where I went. So at the light of this picture, do you still think that the Survivor Series concept change it to a brand versus brand just to emphasize the brand?
Well, do they get value out of it? Is that adding that? Is there creative action to brand it the way that they do? Does that actually make the pay-per-view more valuable than it would be otherwise? I'm not sure.
Well, actually, but you said one thing during this interview. You said Raw and SmackDown are the most valuable assets of WWE. Actually, this is the reason why people are paying the network. People are paying the subscription to see Raw and SmackDown. So, which better way to have a pay-per-view to make them clash, and the winner is WWE. It's like when we had the Attitude Era and WWE versus WCW. Okay, actually there were two separate companies, but the winner was wrestling. Wrestling entered in the real life of the United States more than it was before, and it became a juggernaut. You see the increase in revenues for the WWE. Even Ted Turner made money in those years. So I think the concept is pretty similar. Actually, they are emphasizing the brand and keep the brand up for themselves.
Sure. I think in theory that makes a lot of sense and would be more effective if they executed it differently. I think my understanding is that wrestlers jump back and forth between Raw and SmackDown without too much event to it. And if wrestlers were kept more separate, I know there was a year or two earlier there was something like the wild card rule where people could jump back and forth. But if the borders between the brands were more strict, then that could mean a lot more. Yeah,
absolutely. This is something that our chief of staff will agree. There has to be separation, okay? And they are doing this with NXT now. And they did enter the Survivor Series this year. It's a Raw versus SmackDown, and now Raw versus SmackDown versus NXT. And that is, I don't know, it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, I don't know. Maybe we'll see in the future. But they're trying to keep it separate. And maybe for the future, this is good. For the present, we have to go through this pandemic, and we will see what will be Raw and SmackDown after the pandemic. They are already thinking about leaving aside the Thunderdome. So they may change something, and we will see. So, Brandon, thank you for your time. You took the chance to have this little talk with me. I hope you liked this hour with me. I hope you like the idea of getting back here once in a while and speak our business when we have some big change, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate it, and I enjoy talking with you. And it's always great to connect with other wrestling fans and other people who are thinking about wrestling business, throughout the world. So it's great. I would be glad to.
Perfect. So it will be my honor to have you back here. But before finishing this episode, I have one more question for you. But this is not about business, okay? It's about wrestling. Okay, we are the Royal Rumble coming up. What's your pick for male or female?
Let's see. Daniel Bryan for the men's, and
Okay.
I have not given an ounce of thought to who will win the women's Royal Rumble. Who are the champions right now? Is Sasha Banks one of the champions? You can tell
No
how
way.
closely I follow
No,
the product.
So you don't watch the product? I don't know.
I say I follow it. I watch. I put the pay-per-views on, and I kind of watch them. I sometimes put on the TV, but I listen to podcasts where people talk about what happened, so I can passively know what happened without having to watch the shows. I have no idea.
Well, we have our champions are Sasha Banks and Asuka. So in the NXT we have Io Shirai champion. All the others are free.
Charlotte won last year, so I don't think she'll be winning again. But maybe Bayley.
Bayley. This is a good pick. Actually, they're making a storyline out of it, with Bayley saying that she is going to win the Royal Rumble because last year she was champion, could not compete. That's interesting. If you want my point of view, my winner for the male Royal Rumble is Jinder Mahal.
Wow.
This is a bold pick, but you mentioned the Superstar International that is coming up from India. So thinking about it. And for the females, I would like to say Rhea Ripley, but I'm thinking she's not the role model the WWE wants. Yeah. This is the role model the NXT fans will want. And I'm scared, but yes, I would say if it's not Rhea Ripley, it's going to be Bayley. My pick. Okay, Brandon, thank you again for being with me tonight, and I really hope to see you again, to listen from you again on this podcast.
Yeah, talk to you again soon.
Talk to you again soon. Bye. Oh, and stay safe.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And for all the other guys listening, thank you for having the passion to get to this point. We see us next week for the Royal Rumble. We have to see what the prediction is for SideTalk Slam for the Royal Rumble. See you next week.